Welcome. Update: after 6 years of dealing with my wife's infidelity, I have asked her for a final separation. I've noticed that I've been posting on these subs more lately than I have in years. I attributed this mainly to the fact that mine and my wife's external issues are very similar to how they were when she had started her affair in 2016, not relationship issues, more like issues with her family members going to jail, plus a few other things. However, another reason I have found myself back here is that in the last couple of months she has been communicating how difficult it has been for her in the last few years to feel unloved, due to my emotional detachment from her after much of her truth and lies came out in 2018. I made a conscious decision to start working on showing more vulnerability, and stepping out of my comfort zone to work on repairing some of the damage. This is much easier for me to do now that I have had years of personal growth. I understand many of my own shortcomings in the relationship, why many of them are justifiable because of the amount of things she put me through, and why it is understandable that she needs me to work on these areas. I haven't really communicated to her my new commitment to review and repair some of the damage from the affair, as I'd rather demonstrate that change before vocalizing it. But for the first time in a long time, last week I had a hard time reflecting on what he put me through. That came to a head when I lashed out at her in our family hotel room Friday night and Saturday morning. After she stood me up Friday night, I lay awake in bed with her passed out next to me. It gave me time to think about the countless times I've communicated to her that rarely, once a year and almost always after I've had more than a couple of drinks, she demonstrates the desire to initiate intimacy. That got me thinking about how little he has done to help me recover from his affair, and his lies since the day he started his affair. It was one of those stereotypical rabbit holes we've all gone down emotionally. I ended up making a 4-page list of all the extremely complicated things he did or said to me during and after his affair. I took screenshots of the list and sent it to him while he slept. That led to a bit of an argument when he woke up in the morning, but in the end he told me he was sorry for everything on the list, and we had a pretty good time with the kids from Saturday until this afternoon. However, by the time we left to go home, about a 2-hour drive, she had a couple of drinks, my perception, because I was going to drive them and wanted her to have a little more time to have fun before her work resumes tomorrow. While we were on the road, our kids were completely passed out from all the activities this weekend, and we had a little one-on-one quality time. We talked about their dad, who is headed to school. We talked about their dad, who is going to jail for 2 to 6 years, their friends, and our relationship. The conversation started off well with her and I talking about our relationship over the past couple of months. We both pointed out some positives and she pointed out something that has really been bothering her since it happened. Basically, a few months ago she told me out of the blue that she was struggling with ideas of hurting herself. I didn't take it well because it alarmed me and I had no idea things were going so badly for her with postpartum depression, life at home, her family and work. It's weird to say, but I wasn't surprised that she felt that way because I knew she had problems. What surprised me was that she said it to me, because she doesn't usually withdraw into herself when she goes through a depressive period. Anyway, back to today's discussion in the car. I apologized to her for the way I reacted a couple of months ago and explained how that event, along with her telling me how hard it has been to feel unloved, really impacted my actions and thought process. I pointed out that I had been sending her messages of, "I love you," out of the blue, that most nights she would update me on how her life was going, that I was spending more quality time with her without being on my phone, and so on. Pointing that out seemed to put a smile on her face, and she acknowledged how impactful this month with me has been for her, doing little things that have been personalized to her love language. That's where the positive aspects of the conversation ended. Then a few more things were mentioned and the conversation fell silent. This gave me time to have a silent conversation with myself. As I was thinking, I suddenly realized that the conversation was exactly the kind of thing I would communicate to her instead, before emotionally withdrawing, so I decided to acknowledge to her that I was having a conversation with myself, and that I wanted to explain to her some of the changes that have occurred in me over time. This led me to explain to her where I was at emotionally before I lashed out at her Friday night at the hotel. Note that this conversation was motivated because I wanted to communicate openly with her again. I began to explain to her how I was having a hard time acknowledging that after receiving her SOS signal a couple of months ago I have been stepping out of my comfort zone and ignoring the plethora of major issues that I feel were never resolved. More specifically, I said that she never gave me the level of effort that she has received or is currently receiving from me. I also pointed out some of the key issues that ultimately led to my emotional withdrawal in the relationship. One of those issues was that she was never direct and honest about something else that happened during the affair timeline, but with a different guy than her lover. Long story short, in 2017 I found a conversation on Facebook between her and another guy, let's call him Paul because that's his real name, that had explicit hot memes, jokes about her body, inappropriate conversation and heavy flirting. I hadn't seen Paul with legitimate concern, especially when she compared him to her lover or me, so I never pressed her about it until years later. About 2 years ago I stopped trying to pressure her to tell the truth about what had happened between her and Paul, because she didn't want to admit it. Here's what I could ascertain up to that point. In November 2016, after leaving me for her lover, but finding out he had gotten another girl pregnant, she decided to spend a Friday night partying with Paul and his friends. Paul lived an hour away from us, we were still living together at the time, so she eventually spent the night at Paul's friend's house. She admitted that they got drunk and flirted that night, but that nothing else happened between them. However, I was able to verify that earlier that day she had sent her close friend a selfie of the outfit asking her if it was cute or not. Also, I found evidence that before and possibly after that night explicit hot messages were sent. I can't go back and verify the exact dates and times, as he deleted his Facebook conversation to try to hide it from me before he realized I had already seen it. So in summary, around that time she was heartbroken that the lover chose a relationship with a different girl instead of her. She spent the night drinking at a club, with a random group of people that included Paul, who she knew had an intimate interest in her at the time. They flirted with each other throughout the night, and she spent the night at Paul's friend's house with Paul present, but they don't make love or kiss or anything. I'm not asking what you think happened. We all know something happened that night because we are not idiots. I've known for a long time, but I just got too tired of investigating her lies and cover-ups with her affair with her lover at the time, to keep living my life begging her to be honest with me. I walked away from her and our relationship became much less chaotic, and I began to really work on myself in the years leading up to now. Let's quickly get back to our conversation today in the car. I explained to her that she hadn't been honest about what happened with Paul, and that I wasn't going to ask her again, as she had never shown the courage or desire to step outside of herself or her comfort zone to help me heal, which is exactly what I have been doing for her lately. I told her that I wasn't angry about it, but that I was very upset that nothing I had been through was enough motivation for her to change. I pointed out how self-centered she was about reconciliation and my healing. She didn't object outright to my telling her, but she put her foot in her mouth and said that she actually did want to ask her again if anything had happened between her and Paul. She wasn't wrong, and I took the opportunity to say, "Why, is there something you want to come clean about for once?" She replied, "Nothing happened." And that's what triggered the conversation. I told her it was good to have confirmation that some things will never change. We went back and forth, mostly. I peppered her with every obscure detail I had related to that night, and confronted her with every rebuttal she tried to throw at me. At one point I had her confirm that she and Paul stayed in the same house that night, and asked her if they stayed in the same room. Yes. Then I asked her if they had slept in the same bed. Yes. I burst out laughing because I didn't know that detail, and it made his defense even more absurd. She asked me if she should tell me what I wanted to hear, that she and Paul had made love, even if it wasn't the truth. I said, "Yes, go ahead, humor me. I'd like to hear you say it." She said it, and then I told her to go ahead and lie about the details of what happened that night. She asked me what I meant, to which I explained, "Well, you just lied by saying that the two of you made love. Why don't you get a little more inspired by reality and tell the details of what happened?" And that's when she thought it was a good time to say, "Okay, I'll tell you the details of what happened between Nick, her lover, and I, and pretend that's what happened that night between Paul and I." She proceeds to lie about the details of the night she spent with Paul, actually detailing the night between her and her lover, and got meaner from there. At the end of our car ride, when we pulled into our driveway, I opened my door, turned to her in the passenger seat, and told her I was using March 10th, the day she starts travel nursing, as the start of a trial separation, then got out and went into the house. She looked like she had seen a ghost when I told her because she knew I meant it. Pretty wild turn of events considering how we have been improving in most areas in the last couple of years now, but I'm not changing my mind. This had to have happened years ago, and I am doing what I need to do to continue to heal, and become a better person and father.
Comments.
I'm sorry, if she is not to be trusted and made no effort at reconciliation, you have every right to move on knowing you did what you could. You deserve to be happy and have a safe partner who loves you the same way you are capable of loving. Hey, you are torturing yourself all the time. Your wife knows you 100%, she was in self-preservation mode all the time, she knows that if you ever knew what happened you would make a decision, probably against her own wishes. So she never admitted anything. You are the type that can't come to a decision because there is no hard evidence, but we all know what happens when a spouse leaves their spouse for another man and just came back because her lover got another one. They did the whole menu. Despite knowing this, you could never come to a decision on your own because you never had pictures, texts, or videos. You needed to hear it from her. She knew and never told you. You wanted so desperately for her to tell you so you didn't have to make a decision on your own. I hope you have learned the lesson of being responsible for yourself. Don't wait for anyone to come and tell you things. Take the consequences and make decisions. I'm sorry you are dealing with this. I understand what it's like when your wife is acting like you are the victim, and that there is a point where you have to say enough is enough. I wish you the best, and hope that the trial separation gives you both the clarity you need. I can't say I blame you for this. Adultery aside, the fact that you two have very little intimacy is a big problem. That she only initiates once a year while under the influence is an even bigger problem. Now she wants to go on this nursing trip? Big red flag. Unfortunately, nurses and flight attendants have a notorious reputation for infidelity. Even without past infidelity, these are major warnings that it could happen again. Add to this the infidelity, the failure to disclose the extent of the infidelity, and essentially the failure of the relationship, and you have the perfect conditions for it to happen again. Honestly, I can't blame you for your decision to separate. Keep in mind that if you go through with it, I almost guarantee that she will act like she's single the moment her feet touch the ground wherever you send her.